For several years, Google has been in a fight with Apple's iMessage in an attempt to siphon off as many of its users to its messaging platform with very little to show for it. But now, with RCS, Google may finally have the right weapon they can attack Apple with. Google has started a public shaming campaign against Apple with the hopes of increasing public pressure to force Apple to adopt RCS or rich communication services instead of using its own iMessage platform. So what the heck is RCS, and should you care about it? In this video, I will explain what RCS is, why it is good in theory, but the implementation is really not ready for prime time yet. RCS is meant to be a replacement for SMS, which has been around since the 90s, and it is showing its age. So in order for SMS to be able to function across devices and carriers, there has to be some sort of standard, and that was controlled by members of the GSM group that helped develop that standard for SMS. The initial proposal was made in 1985, and the first SMS message was sent in 1992, just to give you the scope of how long it takes to go from initial idea to something that works. And that is only with very few players in the game at the time, so it was easier to come to a technical consensus on how to implement SMS. SMS, though, has been pretty much outdated for at least 10 years. You obviously know its limitations. You can barely do anything other than just send a 160 plain text character message. So yes, it's due for an upgrade. So in 2008, the GSM Association, 14 years ago, began working on a new protocol called RCS to replace SMS as the new standard. If you're familiar with iMessage, WhatsApp, Viber, Facebook Messenger, then the features of RCS will be familiar to you. It is meant to bring multimedia capability to messaging. You'll be able to send high-res images, get read receipts, have group messaging, basically everything the other messaging apps can currently do, but will be provided by default by your carrier. What I think is the greatest benefit for you is that you will not need a separate application to get all the benefits of modern text messages. iMessage-like functionality would be part of your cell phone plan, and the device you would use would not matter. It would also allow for richer communication with companies. You can imagine being able to get account or order status info from a company instead of calling that maze of an automated telephone system with just a simple text message. Since RCS is tied to your phone number, those features would be possible regardless of the type of phone you use, whether it's an iPhone or an Android. At face value, this sounds like a great idea. Now, the GSM Association is the governing body controlling the RCS specs, and they tried to create a set of standards that everybody would follow. But of course, there were several different implementations of RCS created, mostly because all the carriers tried to create their own locked-in versions, with the obvious result of creating a big, unusable mess. So in 2016, the GSMA published what they now call the Universal Profile, which is the specification on how adopters should interact with the RCS network. And thankfully, this seems to be taking hold. Currently, there are about 88 operators around the world that have agreed to support it, and pretty much every US carrier, but Google has been the biggest and most pushy backer of RCS. There are many carriers around the world that have implemented parts of RCS, and I'm emphasizing parts of this. Depending on the carrier and the device, for example, some support end-to-end encryption and some do not. Google, for example, just recently enabled end-to-end encryption for one-to-one chats, but not group chats yet. Some carriers only provide support to some markets and not others, or they're not fully supporting the universal spec, and some are using some kind of other spec. The only guarantee that operators provide that implement the universal profile is that a message sent by a user from one network, say in the United States, will reach a user on another universal profile network in the UK. So depending on your situation, not all of the advertised features of RCS may work, but things are slowly getting better since Google's involvement. For example, Samsung just this year has switched its default messaging app on the Galaxy 22 series of devices to Google's RCS compatible app. The problem with Google sticking their nose into RCS is that they are causing some issues that may make it harder for RCS to replace SMS. Google, with its app, is offering direct-to-consumer RCS, but that is not what the spec calls for. The idea behind RCS is to replace SMS offered by carriers and should be tied to your cell phone number. So with Google sticking their nose into RCS, they could cause more delays in adoption. And unlike Apple's iMessage, RCS does not have support for tablets, laptops, or any of the other devices you use on a daily basis. Why would I want to use RCS at this point when all of the other messaging apps like WhatsApp work out of the box with all of my devices? While Google may seem like they're a white knight trying to fight for the little guy, their motives are not all that altruistic. In the end, they are in this to make money either with our data or by some other means, such as charging for use of its network. To me, it seems like Google is a bit jealous of Apple's perceived dominance with iMessage. There are many users, me included, that love iMessage and can't see myself moving to an Android device because of it. If iMessage could be used on an Android device, could I see myself moving to that platform? I personally would not, but you could. And that is the rub. Google is just trying to attract as many iPhone users as it can, and this is just them trying to remove one more attraction to Apple's ecosystem. I don't see why Apple is being demonized here. They saw a problem in messaging, and it was easy to see that it would take many years before any spec by the GSM Association would be ready for prime time. So in 2011, they developed their own application called iMessage that is no different than any of the other messaging apps out there today. They built it, as always, with Apple users in mind, and it works flawlessly. You can use it from any of your Apple devices seamlessly. It is encrypted throughout and easily integrates with SMS. Apple has minded its own business, built its own application, and users have a choice if they want to use it or not. Why does Apple, or any other company for that matter, have to take direction from anyone, company or government, as to what they have to implement? They have a product they sell, and we as consumers talk with our dollars when we buy it. And why should you trust Google to do the right thing? They have tried to implement many of their own messaging platforms, and they have all failed. Plus, Google has a history of quitting and never sticking with something. Now they are demanding that Apple implement what Google wants just so that it can suit their needs? Yeah, that's rich. This is just Google wanting another platform so they can suck more of our data to feed their analytics monster. Instead of complaining that Apple is bullying users into its own iMessage platform, how about Google help make a messaging service worth its salt, and then maybe our dollars will start a conversation in their direction. On top of all that, what is Apple's incentive here? They have nothing to gain by implementing RCS in its current form. The only thing they will gain is alienating their users with a substandard product. And from a software engineer's perspective, it would cost Apple a minimum of $2 million to implement RCS in its current form. It would take a minimum of 15 people, like various engineers for software, systems, testing, project managers, to get this all coded and tested. And it would take at least 18 months of work. Consider that they would have to test with almost every carrier to make sure there are no issues. Can you imagine relying on a message from someone and not getting it? So the engineering is really not trivial. If RCS was a mature standard like SMS, it would take a lot less time, but with the mess that RCS is today, getting something working to Apple standards is probably not possible. Once RCS becomes a carrier standard like SMS, I can guarantee that Apple will implement it on the iPhone, especially if the GSMA makes RCS a requirement as part of the 5G network. And I'm sure that GSMA would have done that if RCS was not a mess. If you're interested in learning how AirTags work and why Apple is the only company doing something to prevent stalking, check out this video here. Thanks for watching.